Virtual Physiatry Mentors. I'm Dr. Sheena Bhuva.
I'm Dr. Benecia Williams.
And together we are Shanisha. So today we have two of our good friends, Dr. Sabrina Young and Dr. Bunting. They were actually our PGY2s when we were chief residents over at Baylor, and so it's been fun to kind of see them grow into their new roles as attending physicians. And today they're going to talk to us about what it's like doing inpatient rehab in the community setting. And this was funny, but when I was making the flyer, I initially had called it small town rehab, and I sent it to Kara and Sabrina, and they were like,
You haven't been to Oklahoma.
Just because it's in Oklahoma, just because you work in Oklahoma doesn't mean that they're small towns. Like Tulsa, where Kara lives or works, is the population. She was like, it's 500,000 people. So if you want to call that small town, then I guess, but so my bad. So I've already learned something new. So, but welcome. I'm excited to learn more, and we're just so excited to have you guys.
So excited. I think anyone who's been a PGY4, I think you have a very special bond with your PGY2 group, because they're like, you're responsible for them becoming rehab residents. So I'm super excited to have you guys on. So we know them very well, but we want you guys to know them very well. So tell us a little bit more about yourself. Tell us about your educational background, your current job title, and where you're located, and where you went to undergrad, residency, etc. So Dr. Bunting, please start.
Yeah, thank you for having me on. This is exciting. So I grew up in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and went to Baylor University for undergraduate, and then decided to go back to Tulsa for medical school at Oklahoma State University. And then that's where I decided that I wanted to pursue PM&R. So I was fortunate to match at the University of Oklahoma in Tulsa to do my intern year. And then I transitioned down to Baylor University in Dallas to do my 3 years of PM&R. So kind of surprised myself when I decided to come back to Tulsa to start my career. So
Nice.
And I grew up in Houston. I went to Texas A&M for undergrad. Whoop. Hi, Ryan. And then I went to TCOM in Fort Worth for med school. I met Dr. Salad there and got plugged into his network of budding physiatrists, and that's how I decided to do rehab. And then went to UCSF Fresno for my intern year because that's where I matched, and it was a really great experience. And then came back to Texas for residency at Baylor, and then in Dallas, and then just kind of randomly ended up in Oklahoma because that's where a great job opportunity was for us. And I'm in Norman now, where OU is, and so it's kind of like friendly territory because OU and Texas are rivals, and A&M and Texas are rivals. So it's good. It's a good fit.
And we'll definitely go into detail about kind of why you guys chose the jobs you chose, but we'll come back a little bit to residency. So when in residency did you guys decide that this is what you wanted to do? You wanted to do inpatient rehab, and when during residency did you start looking for jobs?
So I knew I wanted to do inpatient rehab after my intern year. I really liked it a lot. I really like the inpatient setting. I like seeing patients' improvement on a day-to-day basis, and seeing how, little tweaks and medications can make a big difference for patients. And I like seeing that, progression, because you see a pretty rapid, significant progression in inpatient rehab, and I really like that. So that's why I wanted to do it. I had an inkling about it in my intern year, and then when I got to Baylor for residency, I started out on Dr. Porter's service, which is a medically complex service that everybody hates except for me. I really liked it.
You had a wonderful PGY4 helping you out.
I did. It was all Benecia. It was all Benecia. No, they don't hate it, but I mean, it's very medicine heavy, and I thrived on it, and I knew that that's what I wanted to do. So
I have a little different experience. I did not want to do inpatient rehab in residency, so kind of surprised myself when that's the job I ended up taking. But I think my biggest thing was I like everything. So I liked outpatient, I liked inpatient, I liked consults, and so kind of when I started job searching in my, I guess it was the end of third year, beginning of fourth year residency, I started thinking, what kind of setting do I want to work in? And so when I started looking for jobs, I was looking for a little bit of everything, somewhere where I could do inpatient, get consults in, and possibly do some outpatient. So, and also I thought coming out of residency, I want to keep all my skills sharp. So I was thinking, you know, an inpatient setting is a good way to do that. And I just wanted a kind of a broad spectrum because I still was like, I'm not sure what I want to do and what my niche is going to be. So keeping it broad to me was a good way to do that. And I'm glad that I chose that route.
Kara was your two, right? We're like on our teams right now.
Yeah.
Look at that. Look at that.
The B's and the W and the Y's. Yep.
That's funny.
So you talked a little bit about applying for jobs, but tell us a little bit about the job hunt. What were you looking for your first job out of residency? And were you able to successfully negotiate your contract? Because that is a huge part about your first job, right? And it's scary, but everyone has to do it.
Yeah, I think, so I will say, so I kind of already said what I was looking for was a little bit of everything. And so when I started interviewing for jobs, I was interviewing for jobs that had inpatient consults and outpatient as options. And then when I found this job in Tulsa, they didn't have an outpatient setup and they didn't really have many consults going, but they had a really strong inpatient program with potential for developing the other two. So that kind of excited me to be on the ground floor of expanding the PM&R program. You know, even though Tulsa's a big mid-sized city, I would say it kind of acts like a small city in the sense of they don't have a lot of rehab here in Oklahoma, just no residency programs in Oklahoma for PM&R. So it's kind of new to the state, and expanding that in Tulsa was exciting to me. So when I took the job, it excited me to be able to start a consult service. And we don't have an outpatient setup, but in talks currently with the administration about setting that up in the future. So whenever I was to answer the contract negotiation part, I think that was just what I wanted to make sure that all those things would be available to me. And I think when you're negotiating a contract, it's really important to have everything that you want in that contract, and if they'll agree to it, like the specifics. So I think the question you asked is, were you able to successfully negotiate anything in your contract? I think the most successful thing I had was getting a 2-year guarantee instead of a 1-year guarantee for my salary, so that allowed me to figure out billing and coding and all that stuff that eventually, you know, your livelihood's going to be based on if you don't have that guarantee to fall back on. So having 2 years of that is a really nice thing, kind of baseline to have, you know, and as you kind of get your bearings in a new job.
I know that we talked a lot, and I think it's important. We kind of mentioned that in one of our posts, that you have people that you trust that you can go over your contract. That might be a few years ahead of you, or just experience, because I know we went over it a lot, and with Dr. Slott as well, and he was able to be like, yep, we were like, that sounds good, don't do that, yep. So
exactly, yeah.
Advice.
I asked a lot of you guys and our attendings questions about finances, billing. Is this, you know, they're offering me this salary, is this actually a doable salary once I don't have that guarantee? Those kinds of questions, and people were super helpful.
What about you, Sabrina? How was it for you?
Well, as y'all know, I had a lot of babies in residency. I had 2, and so it seems like a lot. And so I kind of got a late start on the job hunt. I didn't start, I think most people kind of start looking around October when PM&R happens with the big job conference, or job fair, whatever it's called. But I wasn't able to do that because I had a newborn at home. And so I started in January just going through a recruiter, and which made it pretty easy in terms of she just kind of plugged me into the places that I was interested in. Really what we were looking for is just something that was family friendly. We didn't want to be in a big urban setting, small town there was a good place, felt safe and a good community feel, and somewhere where we could put down roots and raise our kids. Somewhere where, they can go play outside in the street, and not in the street, obviously, but, play outside and, you don't necessarily worry about abductions or something. So that's really what we were looking for. And that's kind of how I landed here. This little town is a small town, Sheena, so you're right here. And it's really sweet. It just has a lot of good offerings for a young family. And in terms of what I was looking for in a practice setting, I just wanted, I wanted inpatient for sure. I wanted a mix of consults too. And I really don't enjoy outpatient, and I didn't want to have anything that would have any outpatient component forced upon me. And so those were the main things that I was looking for. And then much like what Kara said, when you're coming to somewhere where there isn't a huge PM&R presence, which I think is different for a lot of us because we've gone to residency programs in big towns that have a residency program, so everybody knows what rehab is for the most part. And, there are rehab doctors all over the place versus when you go somewhere where there isn't any rehab presence. Like I'm only the second PM&R doctor in the city. There was really nothing developed. We're working on developing an outpatient presence, like Kara said, and some skilled presence too, all kinds of stuff. And so it's fun to be on the ground level of that. And then in terms of the contract negotiation, honestly, I think this is another good thing about going to a small community place. Like they're trying to recruit you, and they really try to sweeten the deal a lot, because especially if you want to do inpatient, you're in a great situation because everybody needs inpatient. Not a lot of people want to do it. And so they kind of roll out the red carpet for you, and they will really cater to what you want. And so the contract, and when you're going with a hospital, I'm a hospital employee. And so the hospital contracts have a lot of stuff in there that you can't really negotiate so much. And so it was really just, I think the one thing that I pushed them to put in there was to guarantee my vacation time, saying that they would get a locums because, they said that I get, X number of weeks of vacation and all these days of holiday things, but they didn't say how I was supposed to do that. And with only one other rehab doctor in town, I wanted to make sure that those were guaranteed for me. And so they put in a locums clause. But other than that, I mean, it was good and standard.
Nice.
And I would say, go ahead. I was just going to say, if you're in a good position, I think you both were, if you're open to going somewhere else, like you said, the world is your oyster because you can do very well if you're open to going anywhere. So,
yep. So on top of navigating your first year on your own, which is already pretty anxiety filled, we've talked about how kind of what Benecia and I went through kind of starting our practice as well, but you guys also had COVID on top of that. And we had our good friend, Dr. Rachel Welbel. She was on our 6th talk, and she was a sports medicine physician who was asked to kind of do inpatient COVID rehab. And she was talking about some of the stuff that she had to deal with hospital administration and kind of some of the stuff that was a little bit difficult kind of working with. So in terms of where you guys are at, so how was that for you guys, kind of having to deal with your first year, and then on top of that COVID, and kind of coming up with protocols to kind of keep everyone safe? Did you feel like you had good support?
Yeah, I mean, the first year out of practice or first year in practice is insane. It's worse. I mean, I didn't think that there could be anything harder than intern year, and it definitely is. There's a huge learning curve. And so you're right, that was a lot to deal with. And then here comes COVID on top of that. Again, the great thing about being in a small, at least my small community hospital, is that there is not a lot of red tape that you have to cut through. you literally, when you walk down the halls, I mean, I see the CFO and the CMO all the time, and it's just a very different feel than these big academic centers that we're used to in training. And so I'm the associate medical director for our unit or for the rehab services line, whatever it's called. And so we got to set our own protocols based on what we were comfortable with, which was really nice. So, I mean, I just worked with our little unit manager and we just watched what other units were doing. This is where social media came in handy a lot, because I was on the women physiatrist page often looking to see, asking questions about what they were doing, what other places around the country are doing, and how they were handling things, and looking at the CDC and just trying to make up plans as we went. We set our own visitation restrictions. We were the first unit in our hospital to start masking our patients. It was really great to feel like I had some control over our staff and our patients' safety. And I think we've knock on wood, have done really well in terms of no outbreaks on our unit. And we've just, the hospital has been really supportive with that. And I think that that's something that you see sometimes, at least in my experience, in a smaller setting. So I don't really have any trouble with administration.
Good.
I mean, I do work for a big hospital system, even though it's locally owned and operated. And so I felt the struggle of administration a little bit, in the sense that it was just a constant changing regulation, with COVID starting, it was, okay, now we're doing this. A week later, it's now we're doing this differently, or now we're masking, now we're wearing goggles, now we're doing, it was just this constant change. And I'm like, keeping up with it was stressful, I think, as well as, like Sabrina said, starting out on your own has its own challenges of just trying to take on the responsibility of patient care on your own. And then I was trying to grow the consult service too. And so I had to tell myself, okay, I'm a rehab doctor and I have to advocate for my patients from a rehab perspective. So I put a foot down for my own personal safety and saying, I'm only going to see consults after they're out of isolation, so that I wouldn't go back to the rehab unit and spread that. If I, was exposed, spread that to my patients on the unit, because we're such a team-oriented unit that it's hard to, if one person has it, everybody else, is exposed, and including staff. And so hospital administration was supportive of that, which was good. But I think it's funny that I have created a little bit of a name for myself. Like, the hospital administrators know me, because if I see something that's wrong, I send out an angry email to somebody about it. so I did. Yeah. Because I started seeing pressure sores on all of our patients who are post-COVID coming to rehab. And that's just an example of something a rehab physician looks at that a lot of other hospitalists, they're taking care of the acute issues, and they're not turning the patients looking at their, sacrums every day. So I started noticing this trend, and I'm like, this is the last thing these people need is pressure sores. But the reasoning is, they should be turning them every 2 hours, but because of their isolation, it's a staff issue, it's a PPE issue. So I sent an email and to the people kind of in charge of our COVID protocols, and just said, hey, I'm noticing a skin issue in almost every patient I'm seeing. I mean, I shouldn't say that, because I don't, I'm only seeing kind of the worst of the worst, the people who've been ventilated and that kind of stuff, super debilitated from COVID. But it was a trend that I was noticing, and I'm like, this is something as a rehab physician I need to advocate for. So, I sent an email to the person in charge, and she's like, oh my gosh, we'll get right on top of that. And I honestly, they must have, because I haven't seen it since. So I felt like I made a difference there, which was a positive feeling, when you're working for a big hospital system. So I do think rehab, we've kind of had our own place in the COVID fight, I guess. And it's kind of cool to make a difference. And right now, I'd say half our unit is full of post-COVID debility patients, like critical illness, myopathies and stuff. So it's a really, and it's kind of a unique challenge to face too, because a lot of them are functionally okay, but it's their respiratory effort, their activity tolerance, they're on, 8 liters of oxygen, but they're, standby assist for mobility. So it's kind of like, we can't send this person home, but what do we do in rehab for them? So it's been some interesting challenges on top of, starting your own practice, also figuring out how do I navigate this disease from a rehab perspective. And definitely, I think it's exhausting. You feel a little burnout at times, but I think all healthcare workers are feeling that way right now. But it's been good. And I do feel like there's been a lot of positive, seeing people improve and realizing that we make such a difference. That's one of the things I love about inpatient rehab is you see that difference in just a short amount of time. And it's cool to feel like you're making an impact on these people's lives.
My patients at LTAC are post-COVID, and it's like, I wish there was some type of transitional rehab in between inpatient rehab and LTAC, right? It's like, well, you're on 15 liters, but like you said, you're standby assist, you just can't walk. So,
right. Yeah. Right.
It's definitely interesting time to be a rehab doctor, but I think our specialty is definitely.
I cannot hear you, Benecia. I don't know if.
You guys hear me?
There we go.
Oh, it just cut out for a second.
Can you hear me, Sabrina?
Oh,
Sort
can't
of.
hear you.
Well,
Just yell.
I'll go ahead. I'll let you
There
go
we
ahead.
Oh, okay.
But
Well, technology.
I know. I can hear you guys.
Okay, there we go.
just fine.
Perfect. You're good, Benecia. Go ahead.
Don't
Oh,
move.
okay. I was like, I don't know what's happening. Sorry, now that my computer got messed up. So tell us a little bit more about your guys' week. Can you tell us how big your unit is? Is it a standalone unit? How many admissions you're getting? What your call look like as well, please.
Oh, I can start this one. Okay. So I would say that I pretty much, my day is like kind of 8:30 to 5 usually. And I that's another positive about inpatient is that you can kind of set your own schedule. You're there when you want to be there and you leave when you don't want to be there. And that's really nice. It's pretty flexible. So I kind of get there at 8:30. I round on all my patients. We have team conference on Tuesdays and Thursdays where we talk about all the patients. We kind of split our unit in half. We have 22 beds, and I and another doctor split them. So I have 11 inpatients. And then because I've been working really hard on building the consults, I will usually then in the afternoon go try to see like 2 or 3 consults. I have a nurse practitioner that I work really closely with who works on all of our admissions, and then she will also help on consults. So that's awesome. She does HMPs and she does consult notes. So that saves me a ton of charting time, which I absolutely love. And I'm like, this is the bonus of being an attending and not a resident, So that's a pretty nice. She also takes a lot of call. So she takes pretty much weeknight call every week. And then me and the other doctor take about 1 weekend a month. And then she takes the other 2 weekends, the nurse practitioner does, because she likes call. She likes the pay of call. So that really supplements her income. So she's like, I'll take a ton of calls. So it's really nice. I only work about 1 weekend a month. It's home call and it's never that bad, knock on wood, right? And then that's kind of my day, my week. Sometimes it's stressful, more stressful than others, depending on amounts of discharges and admissions. And I think being kind of like Sabrina and I are pretty much similar roles. I don't have the title of associate medical director, but I'm kind of doing that role. And I think sometimes there's pressure on you to fill the beds from administration, or that's what I get from a big hospital system. And that can be stressful, especially if you're discharging a lot of patients in a week. Making sure you have the patients to fill the beds is important to them. So, there's some days that are longer than others, but it's a pretty nice gig, I would say, for being a physician. It's a pretty nice lifestyle, I would say.
Tell you guys something. I did admissions on Thursday for inpatient rehab, and we had 7 admissions. I was like, I feel like I'm interning. I feel like I'm on call again in residency. Thank God my partner took 3 of them. So, but I was like, this feels just like being at Baylor on a weekend. But you get paid for it. That's the
difference. That's what makes it much easier. Yeah.
Yes, it is. Go ahead, Sabrina, tell us a little bit about your day.
I'm sorry.
Well, mine is a little bit different. I am usually getting up there around 8. That is what's really nice about inpatient rehab, is that you have the day-to-day flexibility, which is really important to me as a mom of toddlers. Like, I can run out to go, pre-COVID when they were in daycare, I could go to their little, trick-or-treating thing at daycare and come back to work, no problem, or take them to doctor's appointments. So that was nice. But so I get there somewhere around 7:30 or 8, and prior to this January, this year, I was seeing 15 to 18 of our 22 people on our unit. We can sometimes flex up to 24, so I was seeing somewhere most of those. And then that was all I was doing up until January. And then in January, we're starting to prep me to transition to medical director. In October, the hospital has some kind of 2-year requirement. So so in October, I'm going to do that. So I'm just kind of like acting as that right now. So I'm doing, our census is a bit lower right now. The census has just been kind of all over the place during COVID. Like, it's either the hospital's full of COVID and not a lot of them are making it to us, or, I don't know. It's just been up and down. So right now our census is sitting around 12 or 14. So I have all those, and then I see all the consults, and that is anywhere from, 5 to 7 patients a day, usually, not new ones. Sometimes. And I'm working with the liaisons on who to bring to the unit, and doing the outside admissions and everything. So I'm these days, before I was leaving by 5 at the latest, now I'm there until at least 6 or so. So it's kind of a bit of a transition right now, but it should be getting better soon. So that's kind of what my week is like. And again, team conference Tuesdays and Thursdays, and I try to do my consults mostly in the afternoons, do all my inpatient, get them all tucked in before lunch.
About how many admissions do you have roughly a day? 1 or 2? Varies.
Well, yeah. I mean, sometimes we can have 4 or 5. It just depends wildly on what's going on with the beds. But on average, probably about 2 or 3 a day. And it's not, now that I'm seeing the consults on inpatient, it makes it a lot easier, because I just essentially have my H&P already done, and I can just transfer that over. So whereas an admission was taking me 30 or 45 minutes before, now it takes me 10.
Are you guys dictating?
Yeah.
Are you using Dragon?
Yeah, I use Dragon. You type it.
I type everything. I'm faster at typing than I am at talking.
You're not. So everyone, listen, if there's one thing, if you have to pay for yourself, it will save, like Sabrina said, I can knock an admission out in 20 minutes, H&P, everything done, because it is so fast. So you need.
Well, Carrie, you probably have like set like templates and stuff, right? If it's like
exactly
or something.
Yeah, lots of templates, plus the nurse practitioner helps a lot. So
yeah, that helps. Yeah,
this nurse practitioner gig is
I know. How do I get one of those?
I know, it's awesome. I'd say it's the biggest plus of my job for sure.
Do you feel like she had a lot of experience? Because obviously this is a hot topic, nurse practitioners, and do you feel comfortable with her like managing patients, and does she reach out to you guys if there's questions and stuff on management?
Yeah, I think my biggest challenge with her is, so she's actually a critical care nurse trained. So she's in her 50s. Was 30 years a critical care ICU nurse. So she's really great at handling like acute issues on the inpatient unit, and I trust her judgment. I think that she's only been a nurse practitioner for maybe 2.5 years now. And so when I first arrived, having to kind of train her on rehab related things, because she didn't really know muscle testing specifics and rehab specifics. So we've done a lot of education together, and I've kind of we've got a system down where she's pretty good and she knows, you know, when to come to me for certain things, and we work really well together. So I think that makes a huge difference too, that she's really good and really teachable and willing to learn. So
Nice. Good.
All right, we have some audience questions. Anthony wants to know, what's the biggest difference in residency inpatient rehab versus community inpatient rehab? I was like, it's awesome. I'll let you guys answer.
Well, I mean, you're just in charge of your own schedule, you know. I think that that's the biggest thing. Is like, I don't know. It was so stressful trying to get to the hospital and like, oh gosh, is the attending waiting for me on the unit? And now I can just roll in whenever I want to. And it's just the flexibility of that. And then just in your first year out, it's strange though, because like, you know what to do, right? I mean, by the time you're a PGY4, you're running the service, but you say, oh, I want to start baclofen on this person. And then they say, okay, how much do you want to start with? And I would say just 5 at night for now. And they'd say, okay. And I didn't have to look anything up. I didn't have to question myself, but then I get to real life, and I'm like, okay, I want to start baclofen on this patient, but wait, can I? Like, then I have to like go through and look at for medication interactions, and then like how much is they're going to be able to tolerate, and wait, how much am I allowed to start, and how high can I go? And so like, I mean, poor Benecia and Sheena were like, you know, Kara and Cassandra and myself were texting them constantly, like, what's the dose on this? And, you know, like, how do I do this? So I think that's the biggest thing, is like, you don't have that sounding board there to make sure that you're not doing something stupid. And so you have to double, triple check everything. And you're like 99% of the time you're right on what your gut instinct was, but it's just like, there's nobody there to check you. And so if you screw up, then you're going to hurt the patient. And so it's just that gut check, you know.
Scary, yeah.
yeah, I echo that for sure. And I would say, I also think that in residency, I really hated, oh, not another consult, not another admission. But then when you're an attending, you're like, oh, that's money in my pocket if I do that. So you don't hate it so much. I still hate the charting of it, but you know,
you're typing.
Yeah,
You're typing.
But no, I mean, I think that it's different. Your perspective switches because you're like, oh, this is my livelihood. This is how I'm going to make money. And it's exciting to get a new console, you know, it's kind of different. So that's a huge difference. And then I echo what Sabrina said about, you know, learning that confidence that like, oh, I actually do know what I'm doing. And, you know, when you first start out and we have such a great group from our residency that we have a big group chat that we just kind of ask questions to each other. And it's super helpful, especially, you know, when you're first starting out and needing a little sounding board to make sure you're doing the right thing. But I would say and the flexibility is huge. You know, I remember being a resident and being like, oh, I have a doctor's appointment. Can I leave? Oh no, I can't leave. You know, those kinds of things. Now it's just like, it's your schedule. You do what you want. And actually the other doctor who's working with me, she's a year below me. So she's newer. She's just out of residency this year. And she's having that adjustment now. And it's funny. She'll come to me and she'll be like, oh, you mean I can just go home for lunch if I want to and stay there if I want to and chart from home if I'm done with my work? And I'm like, yes, like that's what you do. So there's some pluses and some minuses, definitely.
And I think other things like, you guys don't have residents, so you usually won't have any residents. Maybe, do you have any medical students ever? Right.
There's an ER residency program here. And so sometimes if they're on the hospitalist service, then because we have internal medicine that consults on all of our patients too, which is a nice backup there too, when I don't remember how to manage like something weird, then they're there. But we do have them there, and that kind of gets a little weird when they do something not right, like start Benadryl on a patient for sleep overnight, and then the patient like needs a CT of the head because they're so confused in the morning and nobody knows what happened, and then oh, the intern gave them Benadryl last night. And so so that's a little bit of a weird interaction because they're not underneath me, but I still also want to tell them, no, don't do that.
I think something else, go ahead, that's different with community setting is, and you guys might, because especially you, Sabrina, because you're in a smaller town, but We at our rehab, we send the higher C tetraparesis we're gonna send it to Baylor and UT Southwestern every time coming from Fort Worth. Same thing with a really bad TBI. We're like, you need to go where there's a TBI unit. So you probably, I don't know, do you guys get those severity?
We have some, but it's not much because, you know, those traumas are not coming to us. They're going to OU in the city anyway to begin with. And so the only time that we might get somebody a little bit more severe is if they're from Norman and they don't want to be in the city anymore for anything else. But our liaisons, like, you know, if it's a high cervical spinal cord, I mean, that's not smart. And it's not because, you know, I'm not comfortable managing it, but our staff isn't, you know, our therapists maybe only see those, you know, once in a blue moon, and the nurses don't know how to do things. And I mean, that was a big thing for me when I came here. The nurses like didn't understand upper motor neuron versus lower motor neuron bowel programs, and they didn't understand like checking PVRs and all that kind of stuff that's just second nature to us. So there was a lot of education there. So yeah, I mean, there are certain diagnoses that don't belong in a community setting for sure.
Yeah, and you know, being in a bigger hospital system in Tulsa, we get those patients probably more than you do, Sabrina, but still, I think knowing the limitations of your unit, like Sabrina said, it's really not us that are the limitations, because we, you know, trained at Baylor and we got those people all the time and know how to manage them. It's more staff limitations and knowing their kind of limits on therapy as well as nursing limitations. And then, because I've had a couple really severe TBIs that I'll pretty much take TBIs and spinal cords if I think we can handle it. But if they're super severe, I actually had one I worked with the TBI doctor at Baylor specifically. We transferred them down to rehab at Baylor because I felt like he would be better served there, you know, than at ours, because he was almost like a minimally conscious type person, and that's definitely a limitation of our unit. We don't really have the education of our staff to be able to manage that. And so but the cool thing was he actually improved a lot at Baylor and ended up coming back to our unit for a couple of weeks, just because of you know, they lived in Tulsa and it was easier, and insurance issues and stuff. So that was a cool thing to see how much he improved, and then bring him back at a level where we could take him and see him continue to improve. So
PM&R, love it. All right, Hayden asks, any important questions you always made sure to ask or address when interviewing for your jobs?
Call schedule for sure. I don't know, Kara, do you have anything?
RVU reimbursement.
Oh yeah. Yeah. So if they give you like so for my contract, I have to meet a certain RVU threshold, and then that's covered in my base salary. And then anything beyond that threshold, then I get into bonus territory. And so you want to know how much the hospital, the current person who's there for PM&R is billing on a monthly basis for RVU, so that you can figure out how much you're really going to be able to bill and how much you're going to be making. And make sure that they're not just enticing you by this big, like Kara mentioned earlier, like some astronomical base salary for the first year or two, and then there's no way to recoup that, and your salary would be like cut in half or something going forward. So that's I think really important to know.
Yeah, and I think asking what their expectations are of you, because you want to make sure they're not going to kind of overload you. Like, make sure they're expecting you to handle the same amount of patients you're willing to handle, kind of a thing. And I think I always talk about this, at least when you're searching for residencies, I say vacation time is so important. So always ask about vacation time. Sabrina mentioned the locums clause. I don't have that in my contract, and I'm currently frustrated by the lack of locums coverage for vacation. So I think that's something that I would, when I renegotiate my contract, would definitely add. So I think having somebody look over your contract is huge, to make sure you're not missing anything. Trying to think of what else I asked. I think making sure the hospital administration are supportive of rehab is huge. And trying to think if there's anything else. Call schedule's huge. I mean, you just want to make sure you've got a lifestyle that you're willing to put up with, if it's one weekend a month or however many weekends they want you to work, however often.
And you want to know too, especially if you're looking at inpatient, are you going to be the primary, like, are you the attending of record? Are you a consultant? There are some some facilities where rehab is the medical director, but they're just a consultant on all the patients.
We had Dr. Carol Lee, her job was like that.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that would be something that may or may not be important to you. I wanted to be the primary for the patients. And so that'd be something to ask as well. And then like just little stuff though, like one thing that makes my quality of life so nice there is that we have access to the doctor's lounge with all the like hot meals, so that I don't have to worry about it. Saves a lot of money and a lot of time.
I thought you were going to say with all the hot docs. I was like, okay. I was like, well, that does help.
Married. Yeah.
Yeah, good points. And that kind of goes to our next question. Anthony Cooper is asking, are y'all handling all the med management on the unit? Sounds like Sabrina, you're the primary, and then Kara, what about you?
So I think that was a huge thing I have changed in my job since I got there. So rehab was primary, and there was just consult internal medicine as needed. And as soon as I got there, realized my internal medicine limitations and felt like I was actually not serving the patients at the best that I could because of my limited knowledge of internal medicine. I mean, I felt like I could do most things, but there was a point where I just felt like I needed to advocate to have internal medicine on every one of our patients' consultings instead of having to call on individual patients every time I felt like I needed help. And surprisingly, the hospital, so actually, I think I started working at the end of September, and it was January where I had a big conversation with some of the executives at the hospital, just kind of advocating for the patients and saying, hey, I think this is what we need. I talked with the head of internal medicine at the hospital, and eventually, it took several months, but eventually we got the support, and now we've got internal medicine consulting on every one of our patients, and it's awesome. It's just so much better for the patients, and it takes a huge load off of me, because I felt at one point, I mean, I'm not like Sabrina where internal medicine was my thing that I liked. So it's really cool to have that team approach where somebody's having chest pain. I say to the nurses, director energy towards the internal medicine doctor, and then I don't have to take on that responsibility. And it lets me do more consults and like do what I was trained to do in rehab instead of having to try to manage the internal medicine parts of it.
I know, Sabrina, I want you to answer that, but I would say, Anthony, something to consider, I don't know if you're a resident or not, is if that's the case, you're looking for inpatient rehab, I would definitely go somewhere that you have a strong internal medicine base for your intern year. We were at Baylor, we rarely consulted internal medicine on our inpatient rehab. So we were used to running that. But I'm like Kara, like when I'm on inpatient rehab, I would rather I'm like, call the medicine doctor, please and thank you. I'm like, yep, can I do it? Yes. Do I want to? No.
Yeah. Yeah, we have the internal medicine doctors who are consulted on every one of our patients too, but I'm the one that's on the unit. And so they come to me. And so I'm always the first one there. And so you have to be comfortable with managing everything, because, the consultant, may not be there, or, maybe
pick up the phone.
Yeah, so you definitely have to be comfortable with it. I think that anybody who's going to be doing internal or inpatient medicine, inpatient rehab needs to, in my opinion, should strongly consider doing a prelim medicine year rather than a traditional intern year or like a prelim surgery year or something, because it is like what I learned in intern year is invaluable to my practice right now. Yeah, but it is very helpful having the consultant for sure, because I'll get the workup started, like chest pain, whatever. So I get it all going, and then I text the internist and say, hey, this is what's going on. This is what I've done. Do you want anything else done? And then sometimes they will order it. Sometimes I do it, whatever. But, at the end of the day, I'm the attending. It all falls back to me. If something's mismanaged because I relied on the consultant to do it and they didn't do it, then, that's on me, and that's not on the consultant. So
sometimes you'll see stuff you might not agree with, and you're like, we're not going to do that. Yeah.
Totally. And I agree. It's like you are like being the primary, you're the end responsibility. So I always think to myself, like, okay, I'm going to do, like Sabrina said, I do what I think is right. And then I'll ask them, hey, do you think this is appropriate? And they'll change things if they need to or whatever. But it's kind of like that. It's nice to have that second set of eyes, especially when it's coming to like major, acute issues, I guess, are the main things. I'm like, I can replace potassium every day, but a chest pain workup or a PE workup or something like that, it's nice to, like you said, get the ball rolling, and then they kind of take it from there, which is nice.
Especially if you have to transfer the patient, right? It makes it a lot easier.
Yes.
All right, let's see here. Alethea is asking, so what was the decision process in not doing a fellowship to specialize in a certain field if you knew you wanted to do inpatient? Well, there's no fellowships for inpatient.
Maybe
if
she
that's
means
what,
spinal cord or TBI.
like TBI or, yeah.
But that must be how I interpret it.
I mean, for me, I'm non-traditional. This was my second career. I already had 2 kids. I was done. I did not want to do anything else. And I mean, had I done, I may have considered doing a TBI fellowship, but also like, I don't want to work. I have no desire to work in an academic center. I don't want to be in a big city. And if you're going to do a fellowship like that, you more than likely are going to end up working at a big hospital system. And that's not something that I wanted. So that was an easy call for me.
And I think for me, it was just, there wasn't one thing I liked enough to do a fellowship in. I just kind of liked it all. I was really indecisive, I guess, in that sense, because I'm like, oh, I like spinal cords. Oh, I like TBIs. I like strokes, and I do think that's one of the things you have to look at when you're doing community rehab. It's a lot more probably stroke, debility, ortho, like the TBIs and the SCIs are a little bit more few and far between. And so I think at Baylor, I'll plug our rehab or our residency, because I think we got pretty much enough for like almost a TBI fellowship and an SCI fellowship. We did so much of it. And so I actually feel really confident in those things. And so didn't really feel like I needed a fellowship in them, but also just because I didn't like one thing so much more than the other.
And I think it also depends on where you are and like what kind of center you're in. We get quite a bit of, not like a gunshot wound spinal cord injury, but we get a lot of like myelopathies and, post back things, because we have a really phenomenal neurosurgeon here who will do these like, I mean, you look at the images of the spine and it's like instrumented all the way down. It's like crazy stuff. And so those people, even though they're not, a stab wound to the back from their, gunfight that they were in or whatever, it still is presenting in the same way with a lot of the same deficits. So it just depends on who you have in your hospital and like what kind of patients end up coming to your hospital. We have a lot of cardiac stuff because we have a really good cardiac unit. And so we get all kinds of cardiac weird stuff, which I'm very grateful to have the internist on for. So.
Yeah, and I think if you went to residency, you should have trained well with TBI and SCI. And if you're not in, like you're saying, not in a big city academic place, you should be comfortable. And then that's one more year that you're making attending salary. And so that can make a big difference also if starting a family and all of that. So.
Anthony asks, how do you deal with the hospital push to fill beds, especially with inappropriate patients? That's an excellent question.
That's a good question.
I can totally speak on that one. So we're one of the few rehabs in my community that take Medicaid patients, and we take scholarship patients, so patients who can't afford it. And so we get a big push from administration to take the patients who can't afford rehab, really, but you need it. And sometimes I think they're inappropriate. So I will push back. If I don't think they're appropriate for rehab, I will push back and say this person is not appropriate, and I'll list out why. I do think the hospital system I'm part of it's a Catholic organization. They're very charity oriented. And so that's a huge plus. I feel like ethically they try to do the right things for their patients. And so I think that a lot of times they look at people who've had like the longest length of stays in the hospital, and most of those patients are people who can't afford this stay, and they think, hey, they're super debilitated, why can't they come to rehab? But I'm still looking at discharge plans, medical appropriateness, what are we actually going to do for this patient? Because you have to really, it's a challenge decision making wise, because you think, okay, this patient's homeless, so they don't have a discharge plan, but could we still do something for them, even if we're discharging to the homeless shelter? So there are some challenges there, but I think sticking to your guns, and you're medical and they're not, and they should not be telling you medically what is right or wrong for your rehab unit. So I think just making sure you are sticking to your guns and saying, I was trained to do this and I know what I'm talking about, this person's not appropriate, and just making sure whether they can pay or not pay, they're appropriate rehab candidates is important.
But you still have metrics to make on your rehab unit that they might not be thinking about, which are important. So sometimes you have to remind them that, like, you can't have a patient come there and be there for 3 months. It'll kill your metrics.
Right. And, compliant diagnoses and everything too. And I think a big part of where that comes in handy is having a good relationship with the case management folks, so social workers on the acute care side, because the ones that don't understand just want to push everybody into rehab because their insurance won't pay for a skilled, or their family is refusing a skilled, even though they're max A ×2 with bed mobility, it's just, you just have to stick with what you know in your training, and just always rely on that and have good documentation to support why you're saying no.
Great points.
Just know that no is a complete sentence too, because at the end of the day, you are the admitting doctor. They cannot make you admit someone you do not feel appropriate admitting. They can have someone else admit it if that's the case. But no.
All right, Benecia, you want to do the final question?
Bum, bum, bum. Okay, ladies, if you were not a rehab doctor, what would you be? I want to know in medicine, because I know what you would be, Sabrina, and outside of medicine. I know it's hard to say.
In medicine, either OB-GYN or maybe ER, which is weird.
Internal medicine, but okay.
Yeah, palm crits.
Critical care. Yeah.
Something that's a little bit more acute than what we do sometimes. I like that adrenaline rush. And outside of medicine, I want to be Rick Steves. Like the travel guy who just gets paid to travel all over the world and stay in nice places and eat great food, and that's what I want to do.
That's good. I like it.
Post COVID.
I think I would probably, so when I was looking into medicine, I originally wanted to be a pediatrician. So I may have done that. Or I also think I would enjoy being a physical therapist. So if I was to do something different in medicine, probably one of those things. And then outside of medicine, I would be like a movie director or something like that, where I was involved in like making movies.
Cool.
That was a fun job.
Nice. Well, I think this was so fun to kind of catch up, and I'm glad you guys sounds like you're doing really well in your jobs, and super proud of you guys and kind of taking care of patients and being their advocates. So it makes my heart very happy and full.
Like our baby.
Hear your mom say you're proud of you when you
you guys are doing great. So thank you so much for joining. If any of our audience members or viewers have any questions specifically that they want to ask you guys, what's the best way that they can get a hold of you?
I have an Instagram account. You can message me on there. I don't have anything on it, but I'm on it. I look at it and stuff, so I'll see it.
I think we
We'll
tagged
tag
on
you.
there.
Yeah, y'all flag me on that. So you can do
Yeah,
that.
I have Instagram too. I have Facebook, and email is just my name, karabunting@gmail.com. So that's
Yeah.
easy too. I'm pretty easily accessed if you have a question.
Oh yeah, email too. Sabrina C like cat young @gmail.com.
All right.
Thanks for having us, guys.
Yeah, thank you.
So thank you guys for tuning in. We will be posting 2 to 3 times a week, and we usually do a Sunday talk every other week to try to shoot for 2 times a month. So if you guys have anything you want us to talk about, shoot us in our DMs and we will make it happen. So you guys have a wonderful Sunday, and I hope the Chiefs lose.